Provincetown, I experienced it with my ex-wife the first time in the early 90s, and I was smitten with the place. I just physically, first of all, beautiful, but also, and this is the key, I think, to the story
Let me stop you for a minute.
Sure.
It'd be interesting I'll ask the question this way. Can you describe your experience of Provincetown from the time you first went there and through the time when you were a fellow at the Norman Mailer Center? So you come in, with one guise, and then all of a sudden you're in a very rarefied literary world.
Yeah, right. It couldn't be more different. So yeah, it's the early 90s, and my wife, who has a very old friend, and he and his partner had a house in Provincetown, and we went for the first time. We were supposed to be there for a long weekend, and we stayed for 10 days because we just loved the place. So what did I connect with? Well, first of all, it was beautiful. Secondly, her friends were just delightful and fun, and we would go out to the clubs. And Provincetown is such an interesting place because it still clings on to some of these Puritan kind of trappings. For instance, the bars close at 1 o'clock in the morning, promptly at 1. And nobody would go out until 11 o'clock, sort of regular time to go out to clubs if you were in Miami or LA. So there was a very brief 2-hour window of people going out to clubs, and then everyone would spill out onto Commercial Street to Spiritus Pizza. Throngs of people out there. And often somebody would be having a party afterwards in their house, and the party would just continue that way. So it was a mix of like the bucolic and also people partying their asses off. And so I had just never seen, and to this day, I've never seen any place quite like it, that has so many things, so many pieces going on at the same time in such a contained space, really, in terms of like real estate. And so we'd spend the days out at the beach, and we would have cookouts, and we met a ton of people. And we started coming back as often as we could. At least once a year, often more than that. We spent a couple of Thanksgivings there, and then several summers. We were able, by the about 1996 or 7, we bought a cottage there. And it was small, and I didn't care. We spent a lot of time fixing it up. And I have, to this day, I've never felt more at home or connected to a place as when we had that cottage in Provincetown. It made me feel as though I owned a little tiny piece of this village where I could go and feel completely comfortable and accepted. And that's if there's a theme to my book, is that I think all of us on some level are looking for a place where we feel at home, connected. And I would say the place where I felt that the most during this period was Provincetown. So at first we experienced it as, day trippers, tourists. Then we were able to spend up to a month there. We did that a couple of times. And then when the marriage fell apart and we were splitting up assets, my one big regret was not the pretty nice house in Washington, D.C. that I walked away from, but it was Rachel getting that cottage in Provincetown. I really regret that, but that's the way it happened. So that's when I got serious about writing. Now we're into the late 90s. I got serious about writing. I still had a lot of friends in Provincetown. And I signed up for the very first creative writing workshop I ever took was at the Provincetown Fine Arts Work Center. And Paul Lisicki, a poet and memoirist, was teaching a class there. And he was the person that taught me my first creative writing class. And he had some nice things to say about my writing. And honestly, I was fragile enough then that if somebody hadn't been supportive, it would have been easy for me to stop and just say, this isn't for me. But he was actually quite complimentary. And so I had moved to Miami by then, had not gotten into the MFA program. I had resisted the idea of going back to school like crazy. I was coming up on 50 years old at the time. I did. Oh, that's so funny. Alexa heard me say something that made her chime in. And so I had not gone into the MFA program yet. I wouldn't do that until I was 50. But I continued to take creative writing classes in Miami. And I finally, in my second or third year of the MFA program, applied to the Norman Mailer Center and was accepted. And so, yeah, here I was at least 10 years after the first time I had seen Provincetown, coming back to Provincetown with my fiance, who had never been there before, to attend a week-long writing workshop at the Mailer Center. And strangely enough, the week that they were running the program was also the week of Carnival, which is Provincetown's version of Mardi Gras. And people literally come from all over the country, all over the world, to celebrate Carnival in Provincetown. And that happened to be the week that I was at the Mailer Center. So you had, talk about clashing worlds. You had us and J. Michael Lennon, who was putting the finishing touches on his biography of Norman Mailer, around a big oak dining room table where Mailer and his friends and family used to sit. And it felt highly literary. You know, we were talking about each other's work, while outside in the street, you would just hear the throbbing disco beat and party going on all day and, you know, into the night. And so it was like two worlds in some ways coming together. It was glorious. It was glorious. I loved being able to show Provincetown to my fiance. She instantly got it and loved it. And it was a wonderful time. Since then, I've only had the opportunity to go back once. And I sure do miss it. I to this day, like I said, I've never found a place where I felt quite so connected.